that's not my constipated face. You'll know my constipated
No, like
face.
a serious constipated face. Why do you think you're sucking on something? And then you like come in there.
That's what I was going for. Yes, I was giving the camera my bedroom eyes.
Okay. You ready to do this for real? Okay. So let's stare into the camera. Welcome to another episode of Max and Steve, or Steve and Max. We haven't decided yet because we just did this for the first time. So I guess this is really the first episode. S&M was taken, so that's what we had to go with. Anyway, today's conversation topic is Star Trek or Star Wars. So, we are each going to debate the topic, and you, as the viewer, can jump in and say how you feel in the comments below. Okay? So, Max, I'm going to let you start off. I'm going to give you a minute to pause it on whether Star Wars or Star Trek. I won't put a verb there. And you tell me why, and I will listen to you, and then I will tell you why you are wrong.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Let me know when you're ready.
Let's go. So, Star Wars was the first film to really be developed from the get-go with Joseph Campbell's hero myth, the hero of a thousand faces. And this is something that's existed in literature since Greek, ancient Greece literature. And Joseph Campbell had kind of compiled it, really sliced it up and deconstructed it to kind of say, here's the hero's journey, the call to adventure from the mundane to the wonderful. And George Lucas really used that as a guide. It was something that had existed, because like I said, this is something that's already been in literature and fine art. But by actually looking at it and working his script off of the hero's journey, he made it into a very concise and crisp storytelling structure. And that really helped with the narrative that, I mean, we've all seen Star Wars, I'm sure, and just that first movie, Episode 4.
Your timer's up.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm long-winded.
Sorry, I should have put the sound effects on. How do you put the sound on?
It doesn't have sound.
Okay. This timer was up. I did not lie.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'll let you share some more points because that was a good point, but it was really long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, minutes, a lot less time than I thought.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But anyway, so I
I'm
guess...
going to cut you off, and I'm going to go for a minute, and then we can go back and forth. Okay?
So,
I'm going to throw myself on the timer.
okay. Yep.
Ready, Steve? 3, 2. Okay. I'm scared because yours was so short. Okay. Why is Star Trek awesome? Oh, I'm not supposed to say awesome, but it is. Star Trek is so much better than Star Wars for so many reasons, okay? One, it actually impacted the way I thought about things. It made me think deeper about things. The speeches in it were effing awesome, right? It was the first time that they had like a lot of people in the future that had like minorities, we had aliens, we had different genders, we had all kinds of technology that they had there that came into the modern world, like plasma TV, cell phones, Bluetooth, tablets. You've got these powerful captains who are like almost like powerful leaders that you could see in today's society reflected, and like there was a lot of like societal commentary that wasn't there as much in Star Wars. We also had amazing characters like Jean-Luc Picard. Q is my favorite. He's the one who got me into it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, Q's dorky, but I really liked him. And my timer is up. The last thing I'm going to end with is that I feel like Gene Roddenberry had like a positive outlook to the future, and that I hadn't seen that before until that happened.
Right, and so to kind of respond
Drop the mic. It's your phone, so I'm not going to do that.
In response to your last comment, that's very interesting that you said that it was the positive outlook, because that was one of the things that Star Wars did as a first, was it made the future dirty and gritty. Because up until then, when you watch the old sci-fi Forbidden Planet and Twilight Zone, the future was always portrayed in that neo-modern gleam.
Yeah.
And he was the first one to show, listen, if you're going to be out in the desert of a planet, everything's going to have dirt on it and sand and everything.
Right.
And so he portrayed a very realistic future in which, you know, you feel as if it were the future, all just the little, you know, details of life would be the same. You wouldn't have the automatic clean floor and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and I completely agree that Gene Roddenberry did present a great vision and hope for humanity. And I know that with the recent J.J. Abrams movie, there were actually some complaints that they kept Chekhov, but they didn't add an Arabic character, a Middle Eastern person, because that was kind of Chekhov's role, because it was made during the Cold War, and so it was trying to show, you know, hey, we can get beyond these tribalisms and really all the isms that have humanity fighting one another and kind of collectively go together into the stars. And certainly that was something that Star Wars didn't have, because it took place a long, long time ago in the future. But, you know, and it did have some role for strong female characters. You had Princess Leia and Mon Mothma. In the first one, in Star Wars, A New Hope, Episode 4, you know, Princess Leia was the princess in the tower.
Right.
But then she was able to be better developed in the following two films, as well as the expanded universe literature. And so...
But that's, to me, that's one character. I can think of one strong female character in all of Star Wars. I mean, I'm just talking about the movies. I don't know about the books and whatnot.
Well, if we're talking about the movies,
Yeah.
the original trilogy, you have two.
Well, I'm just talking about all 6 of them. But yeah, okay, we have 2. So
Yeah, well, let's just, you know, 3 if you include the first trilogy.
yeah.
But, or rather, the prequel trilogy.
Uh-huh.
But no, there's Mon Mothma, who has a role, a matronly role, whereas, you know, the princess, Leia, is more of the maiden character. Mon Mothma is more of
Can
the
you remind me
offspring.
who's Mon Mothma?
She appeared in Return of the Jedi, where she was one of the leaders of the Rebel Alliance, where she was kind of the behind-the-scenes, high-ranking upper echelons who, only because this was such an important mission, were you actually seeing her in public, you know. It was kind of that, you know, if she died, the rebellion would die with her kind of characters.
Okay.
And so it was, you know, she was behind the rebellion, and so she was a very central character. Even though she didn't get a lot of screen time,
Yeah.
it was something where the rebellion itself was a female movement.
Yeah. I
And-
forgot about that.
And I mean, if you look at the original Star Trek series, you only had 2 strong female characters. You had Uhura and Yeoman Stacy or something like that. I forget what her name was. It wasn't Stacy. But there was this woman who was in like the first season, but not the second season, who was supposed to be a love interest for the captain, but it never came out.
Right.
And she later played a nurse in the movie.
Well, I think what Star Trek did better than Star Wars was not just female roles, but minority roles in general. Because like I feel like when you look at Star Wars, the human race is white.
Well, you got Lando Calrissian in the second, third movie.
Yeah,
and
he's like almost an alien because he's black. It's like,
Well-
what are you?
well-
what is this strange fro thing that you have?
to be fair,
Uh-huh.
this one of the main antagonists, really the main antagonist in the first movie, as well as if you look at all 6 of the currently made movies, the central character to the Star Wars mythology is now Darth Vader, played by James Earl Jones.
But when you look at it, James Earl Jones is like a dried up white guy. What is up with that? They took the black guy and they made him white too. One of the only black guys.
Yeah, no, it's like not the first time the white man has appropriated the black man's power and potency. That you know, we've taken his land, his wealth, his life, and so sure, you know, there was some exploitation there with Mr. James Earl Jones, but the point still stands that in Star Wars, the original trilogy,
Right.
you did not have the same kind of allegorical races that you had in Star Trek. Because it's well established that, you know, these people like to talk about, even though Gene Roddenberry denied it and said that he thought the Klingons were more of the Mongols, but that a lot of people said, you know, the Klingons were the Soviet Union.
Right.
and so the same sort of military subversion and spies, and how in the original Star Trek they looked like humans and stuff, except that they had the mongoloid, you know, mustaches, like they just got off their horses from the steppes.
But what about those fish characters in Star Wars? What was up with that?
Oh well, no, like that's the
That's
the
just messed
prequel
up.
trilogy, and yeah, in that George Lucas.
You can't
Tot-
not count something.
Well, no, but George Lucas has told himself that he wrote all of the original trilogy by himself, and so he thought he could write the new prequel trilogy by himself, and he really couldn't. So yeah, so you had the fishmen who had a Japanese accent, dressed in like Japanese robes, and were fish, you know, and Japanese, you know, come from a fisherman culture historically, and so yeah, it was just totally like BS. And then you also had the Arab trader who was the Watu or whatever his name was, flying out with the little wings.
Yeah. So speaking of like cultural aliens, I mean, come on.
No,
That's
I
just
mean that doesn't even count.
stereotype aliens.
That doesn't
It's
even
messed
count.
up.
Yeah, it doesn't even count as allegory.
Uh-huh.
It was just like, okay, these are the
Racist.
races. Yeah.
No, it's racist.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a Jamaican alien.
Oh my god. Yes.
Oh, it's so annoying.
And like yeah, and like they speak in Rasta, and they have the fins that look like dreadlocks, and yeah, it was just ridiculous. It was lazy writing, is what that was.
I don't know, but so yeah, I mean, what made Star Trek awesome for me too was not just that they had different races, but that they had different human races within the same human race, but no one would ever talk about it. That's what I liked about it, the fact that they had different human races, and they wouldn't make it a big deal.
Right, it was just there, and there was that whole thing with the original series about Kirk and Uhura kissing in one scene, and there was a big to-do behind the scenes with it because it was like an interracial kiss. It wasn't the first interracial kiss on screen, and there's even some confusion over whether they actually kissed or not, because in the camera angle, you know, the head was turned, and so you couldn't see if they're actually kissing. The actress whose name escapes right now, who played Uhura, said that they did kiss back then. The guy who played Kirk, whose name William Shatner, him I remember. Once again, racist. I remember the white guy's name, but not the black lady.
Yeah.
Also sexist. But yeah, so William Shatner said that they didn't actually kiss; it was just a stage kiss. But then later he says it was a kiss. But yeah, so it was great because it was showing hope for the future and like how we can put aside our differences that we have here on Earth, and when we venture into space, it will be all together, hand in hand. And this was something that a lot of people complained about the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie, where it didn't include an Arab character. That the role of Chekhov was to kind of be like, see, the Soviet Union, even political differences won't matter in the future.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people complained that there wasn't an Arab. But then you did have that in Deep Space Nine, where one of the main cast members was of Middle Eastern descent. Still, though, that's different because that was Earth.
Right.
And Star Wars takes place in a universe where there is
Everyone's white.
not Lando Calrissian and not Darth Vader's
That's
voice.
what makes it worse, though. The fact that there is a black dude somewhere in this universe, and he's the only black dude, to me makes it worse.
But he's friends with Han Solo. That shows you how cool Han Solo is. He's got a black friend.
He's the token cool black guy, and the other guy that's friends with him is cool because he's friends with the black guy. It's that guy.
Yeah. No, I really can't argue with that, because even in the expanded universe,
Right.
it's still very light on the diversity, and when you do have, you know, the Asian characters, you know, it's the martial arts, where they're pigeonholed in it, and so yeah, I will.
I could understand your argument if there were no black or Asian people at all. Then okay.
That
that's
kind
the
of
universe.
alternate universe you approve of.
Well, not that I approve of it. I'm just saying, if you're saying that this is an Earth and this is some other universe where these races just don't exist, I can't say you make your universe. You know, I can't change your universe if that's what it is. But the fact that they exist and they're not really.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing you have to keep in mind if you're not familiar with the expanded universe is that most of what you see in the original trilogy is the Empire.
Okay.
And the Empire was very openly racist. There were no aliens in any position of authority, let alone within the Empire itself. It was all white British guys. And so it was a very racist time where the other races, such as the Wookiees, were enslaved. And there were many races that were being controlled by the white man, the British colonial white man at that. So, well, you can say that you would have, you think it's racist that they didn't have it in. Part of it, you could say, was actually just the racism of the empire that existed at that
What
time.
about in the prequels? I didn't see any black people hanging out in the assembly.
You did have that one black guy, Mace Windu.
Samuel L. Jackson doesn't count. Samuel L. Jackson is always just the black guy running around. Be like, I'm Samuel L. Jackson, bitch.
Yeah, he wasn't that good in it either.
He was Samuel L. Jackson stuck in Star Wars.
Yeah, the party's over, really. But I don't blame him. You know what? I shouldn't say that. It's all George Lucas's fault. The prequel trilogy was terribly written. So yeah. But you did have. Oh no, I'm thinking of the Neverending Story with the black minister who was next to the childlike empress. You know what I'm talking about? He was black, but he had really white hair.
Uh-huh.
So okay. So in that pre-existing times, you did have a Rastafarian fish people.
That makes it worse.
Yes, that was horribly racist.
Yes. Speaking of like the prequels, so if we're comparing Star Wars to Star Trek, the fact that these 3 prequels exist, so half of the Star Wars movie mythology is that. I feel like that hurts it a lot.
I know, and all we can do is hope that over time, what the Star Wars franchise will do will be what the Highlander franchise did, which was just completely disown Highlander 2. And then they even recut it and had Christopher Lambert do some voiceover work to kind of change it.
Yeah.
So this isn't necessarily set in stone. I mean, really, George Lucas set a terrible precedent when I'm not even talking about just the general special edition stuff. After the special edition, after the prequel trilogy, he redid the final scene of Return of the Jedi, digitally editing out the actor who played the middle-aged Darth Vader, who was whole, replacing him with Hayden Christensen. And so that kind of opens up the door to kind of like, well, let's cut out this 30-minute pod racing scene here. And, since almost all the movie's CGI, let's just throw in some plot here,
Yeah.
So George Lucas set the precedent that those prequel trilogies are not set in stone, and he doesn't own them anymore. So there is hope that you can get the renegade version of the prequels.
Well, if we're talking about like...
We'll edit in some black guys. And some Asians.
So if we're talking about like looking at them as a whole too, if we're looking at the 2 franchises, yeah, Star Wars is more mainstream, but Star Trek right now has the upper hand. I mean, it has new movies out. It's popular right now.
They're filming more Star Wars movies, as we speak. And so I assure you, there will be a strong female character, a, fast-talking, kind of loose moral black guy who's got a heart of gold, but you don't know it right away. You kind of question him, and
made by
an Asian guy who is not good at martial arts.
Okay, made by Disney. How much hope do you have for that?
Who's directing?
Sure.
Okay. If you like what he did to Star Trek, which I do not, you probably will like what he does to Star Wars.
So, but I feel like, to go back to the franchise kind of discussion, Star Trek and Star Wars as a whole, which one do you think has had a more important impact on society?
I mean, that's a tough one, because certainly you have the ideals of what the Federation represents, which is kind of like what the end goal of the United Nations is, where it is the idea of humanity joining hand in hand and moving past our differences to just understand our universe and our condition better. Whereas Star Wars, you got kind of a jumbled mess now. There really is no more message of Star Wars. Whereas once it was the spirit over technology,
Right.
all the CGI. Kinda took that away. Kinda lessened the message of what it means to be human.
Yeah. I mean, I love the original message of the Force, how it's all the same energy, but it's about the way you use it. You know, it's very yin and yang, and
And unquantifiable
Yeah.
in the original,
Yeah.
where it flowed through everything. That tree, that rock.
yeah.
Apparently, rocks have mitochondria.
I mean, yeah, that just ruined it for me. Like the philosophical, spiritual implications of those first three movies was brilliant. I mean, it had a real message, and then
Yeah, Yoda as the Buddhist sage,
Uh-huh.
and hey, there's a little bit of Asian for you. There's some Eastern philosophy in there.
Oh,
You can
God.
say misappropriated by a short green guy, but what has the short green guy done to the Asian man? You have beef with him. But no, and I do feel as though Yoda's role was completely, not just diminished, but destroyed when there was the fight scene between him and Palpatine. Because
I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed watching it. He's so small and cute.
he should not have had a lightsaber because he was beyond. He was supposed to be beyond this world in a way,
Uh-huh.
where he was supposed to not be concerned about battles and wars, but about the soul and spiritual cleansing and that sort of thing. And by having him fight the Emperor, that made him a warrior. And wars do not make one great. Especially because he lost. So now he just sounds bitter. Fighting. That's for losers.
It's also if you remember in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie, when Master Splinter kept coming in and fighting the final battle, it's like, you're not supposed to be the main character. You're not supposed to have the big fights. Stop trying to, stop being the one who kills Shredder. Stop being the one who's fighting Palpatine. You should have
Yeah, no, he was supposed to be beyond
Yeah.
that sort of, beyond confrontation.
I agree with you.
The way...
It was still fun to watch.
Yeah, of course. But it's like the way that Obi-Wan Kenobi realizes what he has to do
Uh-huh.
and his noble sacrifice of letting himself die.
Uh-huh.
I just feel as though it's nice that there's more backstory to his character with the prequel trilogy, but at the same time, it really it alters the fabric of what happens in that scene.
I think it does that because it was poorly written.
Yeah. On that we can all agree.
Okay, well, I don't know. It seems to me like you're coming over to the Star Trek side here. I don't know.
It's because we keep talking about the prequel trilogy.
Well, it's 50% of what's out there.
No, it's not, because there is the expanded universe. And I've read the comics and a bunch of the books and stuff, and so there was a lot out there before the prequel trilogy that had to be retconned in order to fit with the new history established by the prequel trilogy.
Right.
But I do agree that as far as if you're going to talk about message and impact on society, certainly Star Trek continues to inspire people to become better than themselves and to become more noble,
Right.
whereas Star Wars is just about fighting each other with lightsabers.
So I'm curious then, why did you initially pick Star Wars? I know you were talking about the hero's journey. I think you had some other points that we didn't get to. So.
No, yeah. I think that what the original trilogy kind of set out to do, and the message about being human over technology, is yeah, take that technology. I think that the message that was in the original trilogy about kind of the triumph of the Ewoks over the Stormtroopers was one of many examples within that series about the human spirit, or in that case the Ewok spirit, but the nature spirit, the simpler life, the being more true to oneself. That message is something that Star Trek doesn't really have. That Star Trek does have this noble and bold vision of humanity living together, but at the same time, it can leave one spiritually empty. Because while it does tell you to be noble and to do what is right,
Right.
and to sacrifice yourself for the greater good, it doesn't really give you anything much more than that.
It gives you that, along with great storylines, along with strong characters, along with multiple different ethnicities and genders. That sounds pretty awesome to me. That sounds like a little bit more than just that. I mean,
No, yeah, and I can agree that part of Star Trek is that message, but it's also, though, name me one good Star Trek line or storyline that is about civilians, because the entire franchise is based around the military. And I know that they're explorers, but they all have phasers, and combat is routine.
yeah.
And so, yes, you could say that that's part of the action, but if you imagine, if you pick up any Star Trek book or watch any episode of a Star Trek series, it's always about the military and what the military is doing, and so it makes it a bit more difficult to. Can you imagine what life is like in the Star Trek universe for a person who's not in Starfleet?
Yeah.
Please.
So, like, whenever we see Jean-Luc Picard hanging out in France, their lives look pretty similar to what with, like, the buildings are futuristic, but other than that, I'd feel like civilian life would be just, like, a super modernized version of our current life. Like, we'd have, like, more technology and stuff, but our core lives would be similar.
But consider this, that it was made at a point kind of halfway through the original series and carried on from then, that there's no currency. And so you have an economy based on nothing. Like,
Right.
for example, I understand there's replicator technology, which really if we could get energy at near zero cost, where you could just fabricate anything, then yeah, everyone could have a high quality of life.
Yeah.
But we see in some episodes, like in Deep Space Nine, where Cisco's father, has a restaurant in
Right.
New Orleans.
Uh-huh.
And, okay, fine. If there's no money, you're free to enjoy whatever path you want to pursue. Why would you be a busboy in a restaurant if you don't need to make money to eat or to pay for rent? And how did he get that restaurant? Like, are you on a waiting list? And then when he dies, who's that restaurant go to? If his son's in the military and, off on another plane of existence,
Uh-huh.
and his grandson wants to be a writer, then, how does the property rights get determined? I mean, what if I want to live in the French Quarter of New Orleans on Earth? How is that determined? And then, there's not enough space for everyone on Earth to have a nice lifestyle. And so, yeah, you could live on another planet and have a nice lifestyle. But what if you want to live on Earth and live in one of those really nice estates that, like, Picard's family owns a vineyard?
Yeah.
I want to own a vineyard. How do we determine how I get my vineyard on, Earth?
Well, if we're talking about poking holes in civilian life, how much do we know about Star Wars?
We know a lot because of the expanded universe. We know that they have currency, and so we know that you sell things that are worth money, or sell services such as carrying freight or carrying people, and then you use that money to buy other things. And so the economy makes perfect sense because it's supply and demand. It's if you want to live here, you have to pay this much. So civilian life wouldn't be too dissimilar from our own today. I'm saying that in Star Trek, while the idea of near zero cost energy is fantastic, think about it. Those people on the Starship Enterprise are risking their lives all the time, and that they have to sometimes undertake like a suicide mission. And yes, you can say for the noble goal of helping humanity, yeah, you'll get a lot of people doing that. You'll get a lot of people who want to see the universe. But you also have, for example, in Deep Space Nine, Captain Sisko dates a ship's captain because that's someone who's like of his equal rank that he can have a relationship with.
Yeah.
And how'd she get her ship? I mean, if I want to be a ship captain, how do I get a ship? Is there, like I said, is there a waiting list? You know, why would you work as an arc welder?
Wouldn't you
building
just work your way up? I mean, to become a ship's captain?
But she was a civilian pilot, and so she was hauling cargo. And also, why would you work as a janitor on a civilian spaceship? You see what I'm saying? If there's no money, why not just sit and relax on Risa, you know, sipping your space culottes? I mean,
that's a huge flaw. Yeah, I mean, there may be an explanation, but I can't really think of it.
well, no, I'm just saying that it's nice to imagine a world without money,
Right.
but money is, it's not like, okay, fine, you have the Ferengi who covet it, but money itself is merely a form of something that enables
Transaction
trade.
system,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a transaction system. It allows you, you know, if you want to buy something and you're a good writer, instead of having to write for the shopkeep, you know, a book in exchange for your eggs and bread, you know, you instead give them money.
Yeah. So, I mean, not to cut this short, but I feel like
Okay,
you've definitely won here.
Okay.
You've won. So, point Star Wars here. Do you have any other? What else do you have in Star Wars favor that we didn't get to before?
Well, what do you got in Star Trek over Star Wars? Anything else, or any other points you think I can counter?
I feel like I hit the main ones. Let me just check. The first NASA ship that one of the first ones that was launched was named the Enterprise because of Star Trek. So,
Oh, you're talking about the space shuttles?
yes. So that's a little
Well,
fun fact.
Well, the Enterprise has existed throughout history.
Mhm.
Like, they even make it a point in the montage in the opening of the Enterprise Star Trek series that you have this long history of ships named Enterprise because, you know, you're undertaking an enterprise and going off on a farm.
Well, this one was. I read that this one was specifically named because of the show, because people called it, like, it was like a voting thing, and people called it because of Star Trek.
Okay, well, the second Robin was killed because of a voting thing. So, now how's that make you feel? I know he's alive now, so it doesn't even matter. So move on. But
I'm saying it was influential, in like actual, like something that actually came to fruition.
no, yeah, and also now that they're outdated now, but the flip phone was designed because
Right.
off of the communicators they used on Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I do concede that point that Star Trek does offer or has impacted humanity more than Star Wars as time has gone on.
I also feel like, I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't normally say this, but the fact that there's a television show actually, I think, makes it more powerful than a movie because of its longevity. If it was like a short, you know, even a couple of seasons, but the fact that there's so many seasons, it just has a...
No, absolutely. I mean, when you have a TV series, you have the ability to develop characters so much more than you do in a movie format. And really, the best writers of today are writing for television, not just because that's where the money is, but that's where you can really develop characters. You don't have the same opportunity to do that in books because, I mean, think about it: how many books there are in any particular series, and that's like like the biggest series you could think of is just one season of a TV show.
Yeah.
And so there is so much more to it, especially when you have an ensemble cast where you can really investigate their side stories. And Deep Space Nine did such a great job in not just exploring the characters, but also in expanding the universe by really looking at races that hadn't been looked at before. And also, okay, and so in Deep Space Nine, you have an ensemble cast and you can explore the characters' backstories. And also, it really expanded upon the universe by going into other races that really hadn't gotten a lot of coverage, but were introduced, like the Cardassians, and the way that the Bajorans were shown as, having been essentially a slave race under occupation, having thrown off their oppressors, and now struggling to understand self-determination and balance security with individual freedom. I mean, that's something that is still going on today in America, where every society is going to try and strike that balance between, security and freedom. You don't want to get too far to tyranny, but you also don't want to get too far to chaos.
Right.
And so that was something that was really great of Deep Space Nine. And so I do agree that when you have a TV show, you do have a lot more opportunity to tell a story.
Right. So final thoughts? Last word?
Sure. So I would say that yes, Star Trek has had a tremendous amount of cultural impact. I mean, we can talk about flip phones and stuff, but those are outdated already, so what do they matter? But it does have, like, if you've seen Trekkies 2, and to see these people who grew up in, like, former Soviet bloc countries, and how inspirational the idea of the Federation and the idea of, essentially, like I said, the mission of the UN is, and how that Star Trek makes that more real and more tangible for people to understand and to hope for, and to strive towards. That's something that we, as humanity, should be trying to embrace. And so it definitely offers that message. At the same time, though, Star Wars offers an equally compelling message, especially, over the past 10 years at least, probably since, the 70s or the 60s, we've also been trying to find that balance between technology and humanity. And people, the more integrated we get with the internet and with cell phones and smartphones and all the social media websites, that Star Wars, the original trilogy, does try and offer that message of kind of taking that step back and embracing the simpler, quieter aspects of life. But it is a balance. You do need both. You do need the order of government, and preferably the republic and not the empire.
Yeah.
But you also need that quiet space, that the forest mood of Endor and the pastoral Ewoks.
Yeah. Okay.
Yours?
So if you asked me this question maybe like 20 years ago, I would have said, well, I personally wouldn't have said that because I'm a hater, so I would have still gone with Star Trek, but 99% of the people out there would have said Star Wars. But I feel like Star Wars is one of those things that like was a craze and then just kind of now is still popular, but the impact, the social, cultural impact doesn't have the staying power that Star Trek had. If we're talking about in terms of a mathematical relationship, Star Wars to me would be sort of a negative exponential curve, and Star Trek would be linear because it's solid, it's steady.
No, certainly the messaging of Star Trek and the hope for the future of humanity has remained consistent throughout all the different iterations of the TV shows, the movies, and the books.
Right.
Whereas the message of Star Wars has become just a muddled mess into, space opera.
Yeah. And if we're talking about personally too, I mean, that's why I said Star Trek, because a lot of what I feel like society, whatever, like I think on a personal level, personally has impacted me, because it's like just watching Picard give those speeches, just watching like the times when like the shit goes down and some character says blah blah blah, and like they always say it in like such convincing ways, with such charisma and like with such conviction. And I don't know, like watching Star Trek has taught me to be a better person in a way, to speak in a more convincing way, to be more sure of myself, things like that. I know like I'm acting like Star Trek because like my mom and my dad, but it was a positive influence on me in that way that I can't say Star Wars has had to that level. I mean, just on the flip side, I agree with you that the original messaging for Star Wars was very important. One of my favorite people on YouTube is this guy named Elliot Hulse, and he talks a lot about just balance about fixing you and the way you act towards society and towards girls and whatever through working on the balance in you. So, and he talks about like sort of like in one actual episode he talks about the force, and he's saying it's like between basically just balancing. It's not that the force is evil, it's how you use it. You know, you got to use it in the right way, that energy within you. So I agree with that. But at the end of the day, what's impacted me the most, and what I feel like what's impacted society the most, and will continue to have that impact, is Star Trek. So I know like we kind of went back and forth here. I said Star Trek, you said Star Wars, and I was right and you were wrong. But I think we can no, I'm just kidding. I still love you, man. We can come to the conclusion that, you know, Star Trek or Star Wars, you know, we can both still hate heroes. It's funny because it's true. Yeah, what happened to that show?
I don't know. I've only watched it on DVD, and it, you know.
Yeah. Everyone thought that was going to stick around. Remember that craze?
Yeah.
Anyway, so there you have it. Star Trek or Star Wars. We still love our science fiction.
Yep.
They both have their places in society.
So I guess this is Steve and Max
S&M.
signing off.
Yeah.
At least you didn't hug me this time.
Oh, wait. No, I'm going to hug you because he feels uncomfortable hugging. I love you, Star Wars. I'm a Star Trek.